Imagine moving into what should be the perfect family home, only to discover that every night the walls seem to come alive. Footsteps echo when no one's there, objects fly across the rooms, and a shadowy presence watches your every move. For Cindy and Glenn Sarro, this nightmare was real, and it escalated with a terrifying purpose. So tonight, we'll take you inside the haunting that forced one family to flee for their lives. When Cindy and Glenn Sarro first moved into their New Jersey home, everything seemed normal. The house was not particularly old, the neighborhood quiet, and there was no history of reported disturbances. For the first few days, the house felt like any ordinary family home. Glenn, always practical and level-headed, saw nothing unusual, and Cindy, though open to the possibility of the paranormal from her prior experiences in life, felt nothing to warrant concern. Yet as the first nights passed, subtle changes began to make their presence known. Cindy described an almost imperceptible heaviness that settled over the house after dark. The hallways felt colder, quieter, and somehow watched, as though the walls themselves were aware of her movements. Glenn noticed it too, though he initially attributed it to adjustment stress or perhaps the natural creaking of a new house setting. These early sensations were subtle enough to dismiss during the day, but the quiet of night made them impossible to ignore. The first fully alarming event came when both Cindy and Glenn heard slow, deliberate footsteps moving along the hallway upstairs. These were not the light, random sounds of a child stirring in bed, and they certainly weren't the creaks of a settling house. Glenn initially assumed one of the children had left their room and called out, expecting a response, but the footsteps stopped immediately, as if aware of their presence. When they investigated, the hallways were empty, and the children were sound asleep. Minutes later, the footsteps returned, pacing the hallway with the same slow, intentional rhythm. Cindy recalled the distinct clarity of the sound, how it moved with a purpose, and how Glenn's expression shifted in that moment from rational skepticism to deep concern. Neither could explain the pattern logically, and both felt a growing sense that something unseen was present in the house. Not long afterward, the family began experiencing a rhythmic tapping from within the walls. Cindy described it as 3 taps, a pause, and 3 more, always at night. Glenn initially searched for practical explanations, pipes, structural setting, or even small animals, but the rhythm and consistency of the sound defied mechanical reasoning. The defining moment came when the tapping occurred next to one of the children's beds. When Glenn placed his hand against the wall, the sound stopped instantly, a response so precise that it could not be random. Cindy recalls watching Glenn's reaction carefully. For the first time, he visibly acknowledged that the activity might be intelligent rather than incidental. As days passed, the tapping seemed to move along the walls, maintaining the same pattern. Both Cindy and Glenn observed that it wasn't just noise, it was an interaction, a communication of sorts, subtle but unmistakably deliberate. The phenomenon was no longer a minor nuisance. It had become an active presence in their lives, demanding attention, provoking anxiety and eroding their sense of safety. Around the same time, the children began reporting sightings of a shadowy figure in the hallway at night. Both children independently described a tall, dark figure, consistent in size and shape, without any prompting or discussion between them. Cindy recalled feeling a deep sense of dread when she realized that their descriptions matched, and Glenn's practical mind could no longer ignore it. Though he had not seen the figure as clearly as the children, he began to sense its presence and the way it seemed to observe the family, never entering the bedrooms, but positioning itself strategically in the hallways. As the haunting escalated, objects began moving inexplicably. Mugs slid off counters, picture frames flew across rooms, and cabinet doors slammed shut. Cindy emphasized that the objects didn't simply fall, they were propelled with force and precision, often landing far from their original position. Glenn witnessed these events too, growing increasingly protective. He began placing himself between the children and the areas where activity was most frequent, reinforcing the sense that the phenomena was learning, testing boundaries, and escalating deliberately. The haunting eventually turned physical. Cindy was shoved while doing laundry in the basement, causing her to stumble. Days later, Glenn experienced a similar push on the basement stairs, nearly causing him to fall. These events confirmed for both of them that the presence was capable of causing harm, not merely creating fear or noise. Cindy recalled the helplessness she felt, realizing that their once safe home had become an unpredictable and dangerous environment. Glenn, always the protector, recognized the urgency. They could no longer stay. Cindy eventually saw the shadow figure herself, a tall, featureless shape darker than surrounding shadows, moving in ways that defied normal human motion. Glenn, though he hadn't observed it as clearly, reported feeling the figure's awareness, as though it followed their movements and knew their routines intimately. Both realized the entity's intelligence and intentionality. It was not a random haunting, but a calculated presence that had escalated carefully over time. The final night of their experience occurred during a violent storm. Cindy described the footsteps upstairs as louder and more frantic than ever, running back and forth as thunder rattled the house and wind pressed against the windows. Pictures shook, doors rattled, and the entire home seemed charged with an oppressive energy. Glenn immediately gathered the children, instructing Cindy to leave the home without hesitation. Together they fled, leaving the house behind. After their departure, the activity ceased entirely, leaving a silence that was nearly as unsettling as the presence itself. Reflecting on the haunting, Cindy and Glenn have stated that they remain unsure whether the activity was tied to the home itself or somehow connected to the family. What they both agree on is that the phenomena were intelligent, deliberate, and progressively escalating. The haunting was methodical rather than chaotic, observing the family, interacting with them, and pushing them gradually to the point where leaving was the only safe option. Now, Cindy and Glenn Sarro never returned to that home, and the presence they experienced remains unexplained to this day. Their story stands as a chilling reminder that some hauntings are methodical and intelligent, escalating slowly over time until a family is forced to flee their home. From the footsteps in the hallway to the objects thrown across rooms, every detail they documented paints a picture of a haunting that was disturbingly precise, and in their personal experience, all very real. If you enjoy deep dives into paranormal cases, subscribe here for more true stories of hauntings, the supernatural, and unexplained phenomena. And in the meantime, remember, stay spooky.